Thank you, sir. Yes, slide 4. Slide number 4. Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for coming out today. I'd like to again extend my appreciation for our sponsors. Events like this don't happen without sponsorship like that, and I think that should never go unnoticed. I'm going to start off with a question and a statement. First question. What is the... I'd like you to write this down. Answer it. Just keep it in the top of your mind or whatever, and I'm going to come back to that later. What is the single most important attribute of a successful business owner, manager, or leader? What is the single most important attribute of a successful business owner, manager, or leader? Just jot that down. We're going to come back to that. And then the next is a question, or a statement actually. The number one reason for business failure is failure to execute a good plan. That comes from Harvard Business Review. And in other sources, we see poor execution, lack of focus, people problems, and Steve is going to be talking a lot about people later, and cash flow are the top reasons for business failure. And that's just independent surveys. Now, like many of you, I've worked in a variety of different management positions. I've, as you heard earlier, I've led groups of up to 17 people. I've managed a $58 million budget. All of that experience was put into context for me when I had the distinct privilege of working for a gentleman named Dennis Klein. Dennis Klein, right out of school, opened his first retail store. He had no retail experience, and he had very little related education. Just decided that's what he was going to do, and he went and did it. 15 years later, he had 400 stores coast to coast. That's an average of about 26 stores a year, and at one point we were producing 40 stores a year, which is pretty much a record pace. There's only one company in the U.S. that actually outpaced us. Now, Dennis got there not because of his experience or his education, but largely because of sheer will and the fact that he did hire a number of people with retail experience and background. Now, I really loved working for Dennis because Dennis would push me to do things I'd never done before. You see, he really didn't care about my education or my experience. What he cared about was whether or not I believed that I could do whatever he asked me to do. And if ever I doubted myself, he would push me. One day he said, I want video conferencing, do it. I'd never done anything like that before. And he said, I don't care, just do it. And he came back a week later. Have you done anything? Well, I'm thinking about it. No, just do it. And we did it. And, you know, I made mistakes. He didn't care about that as long as I didn't make the same mistake twice. But we got on with it. We made a plan. We did it. We learned. We moved forward. Now, it's interesting when you have somebody with that kind of background with no education and no experience, and I have a whole lot of people working for him with education and experience, and when push come to shove, they would often say, Dennis, you should defer to our experience. And at that point, I would often ask myself the question, how come the guy with no experience or education has 400 stores, and the rest of us who have education and experience have none? Well, the answer for that is actually really simple. You see, Dennis always had a plan to have 400 stores. And we always had a plan to work for a guy who had 400 stores. If you make a plan, you can get to wherever you want to go. The key point here is that they had a plan. Now, over the last couple of years, I've been working on a project called the Leadership Interviews. And the driving question behind this project is, how do I manage and lead for success? After working for Dennis, I thought, you know what, I'm going to try it on my own. I had done it once before and failed, and this is my second time around, and I'm actually doing much better because of some of the things and the attitudes and the approaches that I learned from Dennis. Now, Kathy Ann has asked me to talk about one component of this research, and it's called strategic planning. I know that sounds like a big, hairy, audacious word, but really all it means is make a plan and do it. This is one of the key elements of success, in my opinion, so I'm very happy to talk about that. Now, over the last couple of years, I've been interviewing people on camera, successful people in business, CEOs, executives, directors, managers, and they come from public, private, nonprofit, community organizations, small, medium, and large organizations. And I'm going to be publishing this on a DVD later this year, or perhaps early next year. One of the questions that I ask all of them during this interview is, what is the single most important attribute of a successful business manager or leader? And the answer I got was consistency, curiosity, character, integrity, adaptability, charisma, competence, common sense, crisis management, courage, risk taker, risk manager, logical, diplomatic, strategic, tactical, control, motivator, insightful, self-mastery, trust, honesty, persuasive, communicative, analytical, outgoing, reflective, communicative, aggressive, tactful. For every interview, there was a different answer, and I kind of got concerned because I'm looking for the one answer, and every time I do another interview, I get another answer. And I kind of thought, how come there's so many different answers for just one question? And the answer for that is, because there is.
I started a company with 3 colleagues from school, $10 in our pockets and some computer equipment in a basement. So how do you progress from that into a $25 million company with 250 engineers and have it running like clockwork? There were a lot of steps along the way. And I remember after about 10 years of doing research and development, working on the highly technical side of things, but always being passionate about people, we had rejigged our functions and our tasks, and I was delightfully assigned human development, leadership development, management development. And in doing that, I went out and found as many consultants as I could, went to a lot of lunches, and just tried to pick their brains and find out what they would have to say about leadership. And one day this woman asks me to tell me a little bit about my partners and myself. So I did. Little things about how we worked when we came in, the things we sort of liked and how we communicated. She sat back, thought for a few minutes, and then she looked at me and she told me how the entire company operated. And of course, to my surprise, she was incredibly right. And I asked her, I said, how do you do that? What are the concepts behind you being able to do that? Just from some information about the leaders, go and tell me how the corporation operates. And she said it has to do with human dynamics. Some people call it personality type, some people call it true colors, but it's understanding the fabric of your people, of how we go about doing things, that creates the entire organization. And of course, water flows downhill, so the overriding personalities of the people at the top will govern what goes on within the organization. Some of that comes from the strength of their character, some of that comes from like tends to hire like-minded individuals. So your organization will grow and build on that. The tool that I took was the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator. Now, today I believe there's about 1,600 instruments out there. But the big learning from all of this isn't which particular tool you use or whether you are stuffing someone in a box or you're empowering them to learn more about themselves and about their particular skill sets and how they go about making decisions and how they go about communicating, where they get their energy from, and the way they set goals. The biggest overarching learning in all of this, and I've told people, if you remember absolutely nothing about the details of personality type, at least remember this one particular thing. And that is that the differences between humans is real, and it governs how they perform and how they behave and everything.
So there it is. What Eric was alluding to is the fact that we are all hardwired differently. We're born that way. And through our lives, we have different experiences, and the combination of those things produces a unique individual and a unique perspective on the world. Your personality actually colors your view of the world and how you see things. And there is nobody who's going to escape that. So to really understand the mechanics of good leadership and management, I had to get behind the personality. Can't get away from that, but I had to understand the personality of the person that I was dealing with, that I was interviewing, look behind the personality, and then find the things that were common to everybody in terms of success. And one of the things that I found behind there was this thing called planning. They all had some form of plan, and they all executed the plan, because if they didn't have the plan, they didn't execute it, they were not a success in their own eyes.
Well, I've done a lot of strategic plans. I've had a 30-year career so far, and I started with Michael Porter, Harvard University's strategic planning, down to the very logical approach to it, from mission to vision to goals to objectives to key success factors, and down to resource allocation and responsibility assignment and so on. And it was all, I mean, the concept was you did your plan and then you basically implemented your plan. But what happened was things would change, and of course the original plan would end up on the shelf and people would be doing something else and so on. And I've also studied Dr. Brenda Zimmerman's work in complexity science around, not planning, creating some minimum specifications, a general direction, strategic intent, where you want to go, and then, waiting for things to happen and emerge and so on. Brenda doesn't suggest that that's all you do, but when things are uncertain and when it's difficult to get agreement, that's the best way to go. And at the end of the day, of course, it's a combination of those things. It's not one or the other. It's both. So we did our most recent one, and it's all time and place. I mean, I've done strategic plans where what made sense was a general strategic direction and a capital campaign, because that was what was going to move the organization from where it was to where it wanted to be in terms of vision. And the catalyst was going to be a successful capital campaign and a couple of new buildings. That was the focus of that particular situation. In the one I'm doing now, it was about getting people engaged and moving beyond capital campaigns. In fact, making the plan much more organic and integrated within the organization, not just something that a few people were implementing off to the side. So there's been a lot of different ways of coming at it. We found the most recent one. We've actually used the emerging idea of taking things into account as they come along, and a bit of a kind of a rolling plan. So as a continuous environmental scan where you're not just doing it every 5 years, but you've got a mechanism in place to kind of always be looking at what's happening around the organization. And then while you have that going on, kind of a rolling operational plan and budget that might be a 3-year cycle, and every time you finish a year, you add another year on. That's going within the framework of a long-term vision and strategic direction. We've used another framework, and so the point I'm going to make is that you need some kind of theoretical framework that you can to articulate the plan and to get it down on paper and to kind of manage it as you go forward. The one we're using now is called the congruence model, which is also a Harvard Business School model. And what it does is it helps you capture your strategy on one page.
So it doesn't matter what kind of business you're in. Here we're dealing with a charity, and they have a strategic planning function that they use, and they move forward very effectively. They've been around a long time, and they make plans, and they execute their plans, and that's why they're there. This is what I believe that all successful managers and leaders do. Successful managers and leaders understand the complexity of the environment they are in and where they fit into that environment now. That's the environmental scanning piece that Scott was talking about. They conceive a better place. It's one thing to recognize where you are, but good leaders and managers will conceive a better place. There's always room for improvement. Sometimes strategy is a holding strategy where you want to stay where you are for a short period of time, but things change and eventually you'll be forced to move on. They conceive a better means of getting there. They conceive a means of getting there, and then they just get there. They do it. So it's make a plan, do the plan, check to see where you're at, make another plan. Now, as Scott pointed out, we need some kind of construct to use to formulate our plans. And you've heard some people from some big corporations talking, how does that apply to your small business? Well, I'm a small business owner now, and this is what I refer to as for my business model. This is how I construct things in my mind to keep myself organized around my plan. And this was put together by, it's actually a composite of several different planning styles. One is Gary Philbrick, who helped us at Canadian Tire back in the 80s. He's now retired. Porter, the gentleman who actually wrote the book on strategic planning, the original book. And then the Balanced Scorecard, which is taught at Schulich School of Business. So this is the plan that I use. And before I explain what this is, I'm just going to tell you a little story. Now, this was a turnkey operation. And what a turnkey operation is, the head office would build a store, and then the franchisee would show up on opening day, and he'd walk through the store with us with his checklist, and he'd go tickety-boo, tickety-boo, tickety-boo. All these things are done nice. Signs off on it, writes off his check for $250,000 or $500,000, whatever the cost of the store was. Everybody parts directions, and away we go. Store's open, and we move on. Now you've got to understand that in that kind of model, on opening day there are always deficiencies. There are always things not done yet. There's no getting away from that. But they're usually little things, and they're not showstoppers. As long as they're not health and safety issues, the store opens and we fix those things after the store's open. Now for about the first 280 stores, that seemed to work really well. Everybody was happy. The franchisee would show up, he'd go through his checklist, we'd highlight the things that needed to be done, and we would move on. We're getting closer to 380 stores, and the CFO comes out of his office one day, just had an updated report, hanging onto his chest. Looks like he's going to have a heart attack. The franchisees had stopped paying on opening day. And we had a looming receivable, a rapidly going receivable. At this point, we're opening 40 stores a year, so every week we're going new store, new store, new store, new store. No payment, no payment, no payment, no payment, and suddenly our receivables are growing dramatically. So my job was to organize a meeting with the management that would, I wasn't responsible for the solution or the problem, just organize the meeting that would resolve this. A lot of intelligent people got together in a big room, and I did what I always do at this point. I put up a process map across the wall, and we traced the problem back, because you know, every business, including small businesses, there's usually 1 or 2 or 3 core processes that drive that business. And if those processes are efficient and effective, there's a good chance you're going to succeed. If they're not, then you've got some trouble. So we're all gathered in the room, we trace these problems back down, and we figure out exactly where it went wrong, and now we know who did it, of course. And the first person to take the floor, because our job now is to come up with solutions, so the first person to take the floor is the lawyer. And the lawyer stands up and he says, contract. Item, 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 tickety-boo, 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 it's all done. Except for these things down here on the bottom, the deficiency clause, and that's covered in the agreement. They have no reason for withholding. They're in default. We can sue them. You don't want to run around suing a whole lot of new franchisees. It's not good for business. So we kind of parked that one. The next guy took the floor, and he was the IT guy. He's the kind of guy that likes to do things right. So he says, well, you know, we just figured out what the problem was, so why don't we plug in Microsoft Office Project, a project management software. We hire a guy, a project manager, and he'll ride herd on this thing, and we'll all run around, and he'll come around and tell you when you're supposed to do things and when. And then everybody will be happy. But you know, even in a perfect world with that, stuff happens. So there's always going to be those deficiencies. And besides, it's another $60, $70, $80, $100,000 in salary. So that went on the table beside the lawyer. Third guy gets up, and he's the human resources guy, and he says, you know what? We're just people. We take people out of these big lumbering corporations and we stuff them into this hyper-paced process where we're opening a store every week with no training, no education, and we expect them to just perform flawlessly. That isn't going to happen, ever. What we need is a training program and an orientation program, and here's the cost for that. Pretty expensive, so that went on the table beside the IT guy. We had a lot of other ideas came to the table. We had about 12 or 13 ideas hit the table. And at the end of the day, we sat back and said, okay, this much money is being withheld. The problem is this big. It's always been this big. It's always going to be this big. And we've just come up with a solution this big to fix it. We still haven't figured out why they're withholding payment. Well, there's one of the older gentlemen sitting down the end. He's been quiet through the whole day, and he's just sitting there pondering and reflecting and what we refer to as synthesizing the information. The challenge now was to figure out what we were going to do. And usually what happens, and you've all seen this if you've ever worked in a corporation, it now turns into a bit of a squabble. It's the other guy's fault. He's got to fix it. And I've seen this time and time and time again. And it's not because people are being nasty. It's just because we all see things from a different point of view. So marketing would argue, of course, that we have to continue selling stores or our product at hyper speed or the competition is going to run us over. So operations that just better figure out how they're going to fix that problem and get on with it. There's a lot of truth in that. There's a lot of truth in that. But then, of course, operations is going to come back and they're going to say, well, golly, you know, maybe marketing should just be a little more mindful of our organizational capacity and stop overselling our services. There's a lot of truth in that. I'm a one-man show. Who am I going to argue with? I am marketing. I am operations. What am I going to do? So about this time, there's this gentleman sitting going back to the gentleman sitting at the end synthesizing. A lull happens at this point, and he just says, we don't have a relationship with them anymore. Are you smoking dope? We're down here having this argument, and he jumps in with a statement like that. And he went on to explain it this way. When we were small, the franchisees would come into the home office, often with their wives and their children. They would meet everybody in the home office. Half the home office would pick up and go to the store and open the store with them. And you're there for we're working at a slower pace at that point, so you're there 3 or 4 weeks working with them. You can't help but build a relationship with somebody, usually a good relationship when you're working in that kind of environment. And with a relationship comes a degree of trust. Later, when we changed our process and started moving at 40 stores a year, we didn't have that time. So we stepped out and we said to the franchisees, you go talk to the CEO and shake his hand. Go talk to the lawyer, sign the deal. Go down the road, take your educational program. Stay out of the store until we're ready, because you really don't know a lot about this. We're the experienced ones now, and we just want to get the store open and move on to the next one. So they were processed through the company, and they showed up with their legal document in hand, checklist in hand, to meet the operations guy who they probably haven't met before. And they go into the store, which they haven't seen before, and they're not aware of any of the problems or issues, and they go through tickety-boo, tickety, oh, that's not done. Let's make a note of that. Tickety-boo, tickety, oh, there's another one that's not done. There's another one that's not, what's all this stuff that's not done? There was no relationship, and there was no trust. Now, what has all this got to do with strategic planning? Well, as you'll see later on, relationships and strategic planning have a lot to do with each other. Francis Fukuyama, he's an author, wrote a book called Trust. And it's a big book, but he basically gets down to this. High trust environments are fertile ground for spontaneous cooperation, which means if you work with the people and you trust the people around you, nobody lawyers up. You just kind of say, that needs doing, let's get together and do it. And it happens. In a low trust environment, they are typically less successful because people lawyer up, or they step back from this thing and they want to know what's going on before they get involved. There's a little lack of trust going on there. Now, we decided to solve this problem basically by putting somebody in touch with the franchisee from day one and follow the franchisee through the whole process, keep him informed, go with him to the store on the final day, even get him back into the store when we're building, build a relationship with him, and then the trust came back and the problem went away. And that didn't cost us anything because we should have been doing that all along anyhow. We didn't have to change our staff levels. So with strategic planning, sometimes the answer is not staring you in the face. Sometimes you have to get outside your own personality and your own paradigm of where you are in that business, and sometimes getting a business coach from the outside will help. Shake that paradigm and look at it from a different angle, because the answer might be fairly simple. The term demand and service needs a little explanation. That's probably a foreign term to you. We could easily replace these two terms with the words marketing and operations. Now I'm getting into the heart of the strategic planning process, and this is how I keep things organized in my business. Marketing refers to your ability to generate interest in your business or your product, or in other words, your ability to generate demand for your product. Operations refers to the other half of your business, which is your ability to deliver on demand. So first you find the customer, then you serve the customer. They're two separate processes within your company. Now, the bigger part of this is that you have to do all this at a profit, because marketing is an expense and operations is an expense. So here we're looking at marketing effectiveness, which is how many dollars am I spending to get how many customers. And there's actually mathematics you can do to figure that one out and control it. And you also have to look at your operational efficiency. If you're spending megabucks to serve your customer, you're obviously going to, this is not rocket science, I mean, you obviously know you're not going to make money if you're using up all your money in the operations side. So that's the basic equation that I'm playing with as I work with this thing. Now, trust is not in that equation, because it's very hard to measure trust, but deep down inside you know it's there. Now, from that position, it's not a quantum leap to make the statement that there's really only two kinds of strategies that you do in your business. There's a marketing strategy and there's an operations strategy. There's a strategy for getting customers and there's a strategy for serving the customer. So let's break each side of this down into some of the smaller details, some of the smaller chunks, and sort of flush out what's on either side of this equation. Most of us think of marketing as product, price, place, and promotion. And typically most people would go straight to print, broadcast, traffic, which is billboards, PR, event, public relations and event marketing, network marketing, and direct selling. That's typically what most people think of. In a retail environment where I came from, and those of you who are in a product-oriented environment, product, price, and place will often have a much greater impact on your ability to serve or to generate interest in your product. If you're in a retail location, where you put that store will probably trump just about everything else that you do. Now here's a more complex view of this. This is a retail, how we would look, some of the items that we would look at on the marketing side of a retail operation. Merchandise offering, advertising and promotion, customer service, pricing policy, store atmosphere, all of that stuff plays a role. And if we go to the other side, there's a list of some of the stuff that's a list of some of the stuff in a retail environment that we think about when we're planning our retail. Now, a lot of you aren't in retail, so what do we do with that? Well, if you go to the next one, this is the video side of my business. This is the kind of stuff I think about when I'm making my plans for the video side of the business, which is probably the core of my business right now. So do I rent or buy equipment? Because that has a dramatic impact on my costs and my ability to serve the customer. Do I do it live to tape, or in a post-edit film inventory? A little $5 cartridge will kill me if I don't have one of those. So I can never be out of one of those. That camera that he's running there right now won't work unless I got that little tape in there. $5 puts me out of business. So mission critical. Got to have lots of those in stock. And in the next slide, this is what it might look like for a manufacturing environment. Raw materials, logistics, systems management, accounting, these are all things that impact your cost and your ability to serve the customer. Now these are just lists of items, and you have to look at your own business and figure out which things fit into either side of that for your business. You need to be able to pick the right method of planning for your business. This one, thank you Ross, this one actually works fairly well for me. But you also have to have a construct that you can work with. So in the next slide, let's go to slide 28. Now we're in the heart of the strategic planning cycle. Now this looks complicated, but really what we're saying is make a plan, do the plan, check the result and see what you got, because often you didn't get where you were going. Figure out why the plan didn't work, rejig your plan and do it again. And just keep doing that on a cycle. Plan, do, check, change. Plan, do, check, change. And if you keep doing that, that inherently incorporates the learning process, which is so important. That's how Dennis got to where he was going. He made a plan, he did it, it backfired, he did another plan. And he kept experimenting until he found the right combination, and soon he had 400 stores. He didn't keep doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. Now basically what you're looking at here, the vision, mission, strategy, and I'm going to dig into strategy and not spend too much time on this slide. Vision defines where the company is headed. So when you say, my vision is, all you're really saying is, this is where I'm headed. This is my tomorrow view of my company. For example, I might say, I want to influence global warming. It doesn't say what you're doing about it, it just says, this is where we're headed. Or a mission statement, it's sometimes termed objective at this level. It's basically saying, this is the business I'm in now, and this is what I'm doing to affect global warming. For example, I want to make 2-button widgets that will reduce global warming or greenhouse gases. Now the above two items are covered to some degree in yesterday's programs. Strategy is the big one, because this is where you really got to stop and think. And this tends to be, it can be a lot of fun doing this. It can also be a little bit tedious because it's detail-oriented and it's very easy to make a mistake. Because of our paradigms about who we are and where we're going, and Steve's going to talk a lot more about that later, that can actually blind you to some great opportunities. So stepping outside of your own personality can really help you in a strategic planning environment. So let's go deeper into this, and I'm just getting close to wrapping up here now. And of course the execution is actually doing what you said you were going to do. This chart here, it comes from called the Balanced Scorecard. It emerged in the 80s and really took off in the 90s, and a lot of companies are engaging in this now. And this is just one of many different types of balanced scorecards. And this is the one the picture that I keep in my head as I'm working through my own business. So I'm balancing my demand and service issues. You know, with that demand and service issue, there's actually two different ways of attacking that problem. You can set up all of your operations and then go find customers, or you can go find customers and then find the operations to serve that. Or you can ratchet it up a little bit at a time on either side. You can do that either way, and it really depends on the kind of business you're in and how you function. You can structure it either way. Now this chart's pretty straightforward. Whenever I make a change in what I'm doing, or whenever I make a plan to do something, there are 4 things I need to think about. The first one is, how much is it going to cost, and how much am I going to get back from that? But what affects that, for example, is learning and growth. Now when I made a decision to stop doing one thing and get into the film business, my income came down dramatically, my expenses went up dramatically because I had to take the time, I had to go and buy video editing software, buy the camera, I had to learn it, and you're not producing good stuff while you're learning. It takes a while to learn before you can get out there and market that. But it changes the ratio of income versus learning time. And you go through, once you get through that learning curve, then and your marketing starts to work for you, then your income comes back up again. So you need to plan for that sort of thing if you're making a dramatic change in your business process. The internal business process, as I said earlier, every business, no matter how big or how small you are, you have an internal process. You know, if you're baking cookies for a living, you have a process in the kitchen that you use to produce those things. If you decide to cook something different or make something different, you want to get into chili, whole different process, right? Business is no different. And of course, all of that is worthless if it's not connected to the customer. You really have to stay tuned to your customer or and this is the relationship. You could easily replace that word customer with the word relationship. It's one and the same thing. You can really get run over fairly easily with that. So that really is the heart of strategy. That's the context of it.